We'll move on, Keith, and talk about Manchester City. Now, Richard Masters spoke publicly actually about the 115 charges being tackled soon. What do you make of that? And then when do you actually think the case is going to begin?
Well, in effect, he said nothing more. He'd said previously about 2 months ago at the Select Committee that they would be looking at it in the near future as well. He hasn't given away any timings, any dates. And I think, this goes to the lack of transparency. And look, I understand it's a complex case. I get that. But when it suits them, they've been able to expedite things around the other cases for Everton and for Forest. So, I know it's a big case, but they should be able to expedite it in some way. I've said this many times, there could have been ways to attack the whole legal issues, but he's not being transparent. And this is one of his Achilles heels in terms of the way this is dragging on. And it does seem to smack of one rule for the big boys and one rule for the clubs below them.
How long Keith, if you had to make a call, like you've kind of said in there, Richard Masters gave nothing away. Could we expect a verdict by, sort of the halfway through next season? Is it likely to be 2026? How long are you anticipating it to take if you had to make a call?
I think there'll be some sort of movement towards it, as you say, before Christmas this year. But then again, because it's so complex, any appeals, and it could be multiple appeals, could take a long, long time. We could be talking two years maybe to get this resolved. So it's going to drag on. Meanwhile, new rules are going to be coming into place. It's going to be just one legal mess. And City have always known that was what they were. I believe that's what they've always tried to do, is that they've tried to kick this into the long grass and exhaust the legal resources of the football authorities.
It's obviously a very difficult case, Keith. In terms of Pep Guardiola and his stance, what do you think that he makes about the entire situation? And actually, what does it mean for his future potentially at the club?
Well, he's always said publicly that he's been given assurances that everything will be okay. And if they aren't, then he would leave. But Pep's had a great run now. I think he may be coming to the end of his natural time anyway in maybe 1 or 2 seasons. I think he may be ready for a fresh challenge. There's no doubt he's at the top of his game and he's a superb manager. But, everything has its time. And so I think that may coincide that as the eventual results of the case come out, it may just be with football reasons that Pep may go rather than around that.
We've discussed before, Keith, about potential sanctions, whether it's points, transfer embargo. You obviously said about Everton talking of administration. Could we see a sanction as severe for Man City as relegation? Could they go into liquidation into the non-league? How far do you think the Premier League could go with this?
Yeah, I think expulsion could very much be on the table. Expulsion from the Premier League. How far down the football pyramid they go, I don't know. But I think it is a genuine potential here because the Premier League have set the bar so high. Let's not forget that we're looking to try and, I think it was 17 points that we're trying to get off Everton before appeals. That's a big number, 17 points. And those were for pretty minor, if we have to look at it, transgressions on the PSR situation. So if you've got 115 charges and it's proven that you've been obstructive, so you've got really no grounds for appeal on cooperation, beyond 17 points, what are you looking at? You're looking at expulsion from the league. So it's got to be on the table. And it's going to be a battle royal, that's for sure.
Keith, lots of fans have expressed on social media their disappointment in the fact that we haven't heard anything further about Manchester City and the thought really that they're desperate for them to receive a sanction. Is that fair that other fans are frustrated, say Evertonians or Notts Forest fans? Is it fair that their club has gone through turmoil this season and yet, as you've kind of said, City are just kicking this into the long grass?
Well, I think there's a lot of unhappiness, as you said, from a lot of fans from other clubs. People are looking at City and saying, why are they getting away with it, basically, when there's been a rush to penalise Forest and Everton. Look, we all understand that if rules are broken, that they're there, but there could have been ways to have resolved this beforehand. But such an outstanding amount of charges and the sums involved would tend to indicate that, there's a problem there that needs to be resolved. And why the Premier League have not expedited things and brought in extra legal resources, I don't know. They do have the budgets to handle this. And I think there must have been a cleverer legal way to have done this. I say that, of course, not being a barrister. And I'm sure that there is, a lot of detail and reasons why it has dragged on. But nevertheless, it's up to the barristers to find a way to expedite things and to bring justice. And certainly it has a knock-on effect on the other clubs in the league. And we could be seeing City now, which it looks like they may well win the league, 6 out of 7 of the last seasons. So, I mean, of course, people are going to start saying, well, hang on, maybe things aren't right. And those last few seasons, perhaps they didn't do it the correct way. But we need to know sooner rather than later.
And Keith, you've kind of spoken that sooner rather than later. Do you think the hearing needs to be public for the integrity of the league and for fans' frustrations? Is it only fair that this is done publicly? And actually, what are the chances really that is going to be the case?
Yeah, look, I've been saying all along, for these PSR battles with Everton and Forest, as well as for the City charges, transparency is key to be able to keep the sporting integrity of the Premier League going. I think Masters would have done himself a big favour if he'd actually managed to keep the transparency of those hearings, and people would have been able to see justice being done, because there are still so many questions about those judgments as they've come in that are still out there. So it really is important, that particularly in the City one, if it's going to go to those sort of draconian measures like expulsion, that it's seen to be as transparent as possible and people really understand the reasonings and the case behind it.
And to wrap up, Keith, from a fan's point of view, if it does turn out that they are expelled from the league or they're stripped of X amount of titles, how will that affect the fan base, do you think? Or actually, because they've actually won the league or they've won the league previously when it has happened, will that actually have any effect on the fans' perspective on the situation?
On the City fans, I don't think so. I think it will galvanise them more than anything else, as it has done with most clubs so far. And look, it's going to be a terrible situation to be a City fan if that's the case. You can imagine the chanting going on away games at every time. It won't be an easy period, but hey, it's football, and these things do pass in the end, and we get back to working on the pitch. And as we've been saying all along, it's been too long now that things are being decided off the pitch rather than on the pitch.